After World War II, the United States found itself in a time of rapid transformation. The war had left a mark on nearly every aspect of American society, from its economy to its social structure. The 1940s ushered in a period of economic boom and technological progress, but it also saw a rise in organized crime and new forms of criminal activity. This was especially true in large cities like Boston, where criminals were finding increasingly sophisticated ways to carry out heists. The stage was set for the infamous Brinks Robbery. Brinks Inc., established in the late 19th century, had long been a prominent player in the American business landscape. Specializing in armored car services, secure transportation and cash handling, Brinks had earned a reputation for security and reliability. Its Boston depot, which held millions in cash and valuables, was a prime target for criminals looking to score big. By the time of the 1950 robbery, Brinks was deeply embedded in the fabric of American commerce, and it was trusted by some of the country's most powerful companies to safeguard their assets. The central figures involved in the robbery were a mix of experienced criminals and men who had long been on the fringes of society. The mastermind, Tony Pino, a seasoned criminal, led a crew of individuals, each bringing their own set of skills. Pino, a veteran of smaller heists, knew how to plan a major operation. His crew, including individuals like Joseph Joe McGinnis and others, had criminal backgrounds in robbery, theft and smuggling. While they might not have had the high-profile notoriety of some of the nation's more infamous criminals, their quiet expertise made them deadly. Brinks itself was more than just a logistics company. It represented the trust and power of a booming capitalist society. Its role in safeguarding vast sums of money made it a prime symbol of the post-war economic machine. Its reliance on secure armored transportation made it a key player in the finance sector, and its vaults, often holding cash from some of the nation's largest corporations, were seen as impenetrable. This only made it a more alluring target for the criminal masterminds, who had their eyes set on big money, and it ultimately became the setting for one of the most ambitious heists in history. The ringleader of the Brinks robbery was Tony Pino, a man with a long history in criminal activities. Pino's involvement in petty crime began at an early age, and by the time he reached adulthood, he had become a seasoned figure in Boston's underworld. He had committed numerous heists over the years, but nothing on the scale of what he was about to undertake with the Brinks job. He understood the risks and intricacies involved, and he had an uncanny ability to keep his cool under pressure. Pino's motivation for targeting Brinks was simple: greed and opportunity. He knew that the financial rewards would be massive, but he also saw the challenge as a way to cement his legacy in the criminal world. He had the experience and the skill to plan and execute such a daring robbery, but it was the lure of the immense fortune inside Brinks' vaults that ultimately drove him. His crew shared similar motivations. While some were financially driven, others sought the thrill and the prestige that would come with pulling off such an audacious crime. The gang's formation and trust building were key to the robbery's success. Pino knew he needed a crew that could not only execute the heist with precision, but also remain loyal and tight-lipped. His crew was a mix of seasoned criminals, each with a specific role: the strongmen who would intimidate and control the guards, the tech experts who would crack the vaults, and the lookouts who would monitor the entire operation. Over time, Pino developed a deep trust in his crew. They had been through smaller heists together, and their ability to work seamlessly as a unit was paramount. Their loyalty to Pino and their shared vision of pulling off the ultimate robbery made them an effective team. The planning for the Brinks robbery began with months of surveillance and reconnaissance. From the beginning, the criminals knew that success would hinge on understanding the daily operations of Brinks and finding weaknesses in the security systems. They began their work by carefully observing the movements of the guards, the schedules of the employees, and the daily delivery times for the armored vehicles that carried the money in and out of the vaults. Tools like binoculars and simple observation techniques were the initial methods used to gather information. The gang knew that Brinks was not a fortress of impenetrable security, but rather a well-guarded building that relied on routine and the predictable actions of its staff. They carefully watched the building from different angles, noting the locations of security cameras, guard posts, and the movement of the armored cars. They also monitored the routines of the employees, who seemed to follow a predictable pattern every day. The planning phase lasted for several months. Every day the gang would observe, taking notes and adjusting their strategy based on the information they gathered. The most significant risks during this phase were the possibility of being spotted or drawing attention. Despite their caution, there were moments of tension when a member of the gang almost got too close to the building, or when they were almost discovered by a passing pedestrian. But the crew's ability to stay out of sight and remain vigilant allowed them to gather the intelligence they needed without raising suspicion. As the days passed, their plan took shape. The gang had observed enough to know exactly when and where to strike. They had learned when the guards were at their most vulnerable and when the vaults would be most accessible. This period of surveillance was critical to the success of the heist. Without it, the robbers would not have had the knowledge necessary to pull off the job as smoothly as they did. As the heist grew closer, the gang began to finalize their plan, making subtle adjustments based on the surveillance data they had collected. One of the first changes involved the timing of the robbery itself. Initially, they had planned to strike in the afternoon when the building was filled with cash, but upon closer examination they realized that the early morning hours would be better. By that time, the guards would be sleepier and the building would be quieter, allowing them to move more freely. Acquiring the disguises, weapons and equipment was another key part of the preparation. The robbers knew that they needed to blend in seamlessly and avoid detection. They purchased uniforms that made them look like Brinks employees, and they secured weapons including handguns and machine guns to ensure that they could overpower any resistance. The weapons were essential for controlling the guards and maintaining authority over the building during the heist. The team also arranged for various tools that would help them crack open the vaults, including specialized cutting torches and drills. The division of roles was clear-cut. Pino would lead the operation, directing the crew as they entered the building and took control of the employees. The muscle would handle the guards while the tech experts focused on getting into the vaults. Everyone had a specific responsibility and it was vital that they performed their tasks flawlessly. Planning at this level took a psychological toll on the crew. They were constantly assessing risks and adapting to potential problems. Pino, in particular, felt the pressure. The heist was a major operation, and the stakes were high. A mistake could lead to catastrophic consequences, and Pino's reputation as a criminal mastermind was on the line. For weeks leading up to the event, the crew members struggled with moments of doubt and anxiety, but in the end, their shared commitment to the plan and their trust in each other kept them focused on the goal. On the morning of January 17, 1950, the day of the heist finally arrived. The crew had prepared for this moment for months, and the time had come to put their plan into action. The day started like any other for the employees at Brinks. The guards arrived early, and the workers went about their morning routines, unaware that a group of criminals had already infiltrated the building. The robbers had divided into two groups. One group entered the building dressed as Brinks employees, while the other took up positions around the perimeter, ensuring no one could escape or raise an alarm. The group inside quickly subdued the guards and took control of the situation. They moved fast, efficiently securing the building and separating the employees from the valuables they had come for. At 7:30 a.m. the gang was in control. The leader, Tony Pino, directed the team to the vaults. They used their tools to crack open the massive doors, bypassing the sophisticated security systems with ease. The entire operation was executed with precision, each member of the team knowing their role and performing it flawlessly. The robbery lasted less than 30 minutes, and by 8:00 a.m., the team had gathered the loot, more than $2.7 million in cash, bonds and other valuables. The getaway was swift. The robbers quickly loaded the stolen money into trucks and disappeared into the streets of Boston. Their plan had worked perfectly. No alarms were raised and no witnesses were able to identify them. The criminals had vanished without a trace, and for a brief moment it seemed like they had gotten away with the perfect crime. In the immediate aftermath of the robbery, the gang was able to avoid capture for the first 48 hours. They had planned for every contingency, and the authorities were left scrambling for clues. The robbers had divided the money and scattered it across various locations, ensuring that no single stash was at risk of being discovered. Some of the stolen cash was buried, while other portions were hidden in remote areas far from the city. Law enforcement, initially stunned by the scale and professionalism of the heist, quickly launched an investigation. The FBI took charge of the case, deploying agents to interview witnesses, analyze the scene and review security footage from nearby businesses. But despite their efforts, the robbers remained elusive. They had covered their tracks well, and the first 48 hours were crucial. Without solid leads, the investigation faltered and the criminals were allowed to keep their freedom, at least for the time being. As the days passed, the authorities focused on tracking down the robbers' movements. However, the stolen money was well hidden, and the gang knew how to cover their tracks. Their ability to stay one step ahead kept law enforcement on edge, but it also signaled that the battle to bring them to justice would be a long and difficult one. The investigation into the Brinks robbery quickly became a complex and high-profile case. The FBI, along with local police, found themselves facing a mountain of challenges. The criminals had planned the heist with remarkable attention to detail, covering their tracks at every step. They had used disguises, avoided leaving physical evidence, and ensured that their getaway routes were well coordinated. The stolen cash was well hidden in various places, making it difficult for authorities to trace. One of the biggest hurdles for investigators was the lack of solid evidence. There were no fingerprints, no physical trace left behind at the scene, and no immediate suspects. The criminal crew had covered their tracks meticulously, making it seem as though they had simply vanished into thin air. The FBI had to rely heavily on interviews, witness statements and surveillance footage from nearby businesses, but even this evidence was scarce. Despite the initial setbacks, investigators found hope when they discovered the gang's modus operandi. The members of the gang had been careful to keep a low profile during their preparations. However, as the investigation wore on, the authorities began to notice patterns, a few pieces of the puzzle that started to fit together. The FBI managed to link the robbers to certain locations and began tracing their movements leading up to the heist. Internal betrayals and slip-ups within the gang eventually started to unravel the carefully constructed plans. One of the key mistakes came when one of the gang members, under pressure, let slip a detail that helped authorities connect the dots. As the investigation progressed, the crew's behavior became more erratic, paranoia set in, and members of the gang began to turn on each other. This fear of being caught, coupled with the increasing pressure, led to several small mistakes that eventually tipped off the authorities. Meanwhile, the media's coverage of the case created additional pressure on law enforcement. The public was captivated by the story of the daring heist, and media outlets frequently reported on the investigation's progress. While the media's attention provided some public pressure to solve the case, it also made it more difficult for the robbers to stay out of sight. As the investigation unfolded, the media played a critical role in keeping the story in the public eye, further fueling the urgency of finding those responsible. The pressure on the gang members continued to mount as the investigation closed in. Paranoia spread like wildfire through the group. They had always been a tightly knit crew, but the heat from the authorities combined with the looming possibility of capture started to take its toll. One by one, the robbers began to crack under the intense pressure. The first to break was Joseph "Joe" McGinnis, who had been involved in the planning stages of the robbery. He had been one of the most trusted members of the crew, but the fear of being caught eventually led him to make a fatal mistake. McGinnis was arrested after being caught in a series of lies during questioning. His arrest became a turning point in the investigation, as he was quickly pressured to provide information about the other members of the crew. As the investigation intensified, the other gang members grew increasingly paranoid. They knew that McGinnis's capture was a major blow to their chances of getting away with the crime. Each member feared that the others would betray them, and this fear led to further internal tension. The gang's once solid unity began to crumble. In the end, the fear of betrayal and the psychological strain from the investigation caused the crew to unravel. Law enforcement used the information provided by McGinnis to begin arresting other members of the gang. One by one, they were caught in increasingly dramatic and tense confrontations. The crew, once so confident and composed, was now on the brink of collapse. The robbers, who had managed to evade capture for so long, were now being rounded up and brought in for questioning. Each arrest sent shockwaves through the criminal world, signaling that the Brinks robbery was no longer an unsolved case, but one that was being rapidly deconstructed. After the arrests were made, the legal proceedings began, and the members of the Brinks robbery crew found themselves in a battle to avoid conviction. The trials were highly publicized, with the media continuing to follow the case closely. The evidence against the robbers was overwhelming, but the legal process was complicated by attempts from the defense to discredit the prosecution's case. The turning point in the legal battle came when crucial evidence was presented in court. This included testimony from Joseph McGinnis, who had become a key witness for the prosecution. McGinnis's account of the planning and execution of the heist provided valuable insight into the inner workings of the gang and how they had managed to pull off the robbery. His testimony, along with the physical evidence recovered from various locations, made it clear that the crew had meticulously planned the heist and had used their skills to carry it out with precision. Another key piece of evidence came in the form of a trail of financial transactions, which linked several of the robbers to known criminal activities. This evidence helped seal the case against them. The defense tried to argue that the robbers had not been involved in the planning or execution of the heist, but the mountain of evidence made it difficult for the defense to mount a convincing case. The trial culminated in the sentencing of the robbers. Most of the crew received long prison sentences, with Tony Pino, the mastermind behind the heist, being sentenced to a lengthy prison term. Some members of the crew were able to negotiate reduced sentences in exchange for cooperation with the investigation, while others were convicted on multiple charges related to the robbery. In the end, justice was served, but the aftermath left an indelible mark on the criminal world and law enforcement alike. The Brinks Robbery remains one of the most famous heists in American history, and its impact continues to be felt today. The case became a symbol of both criminal ingenuity and law enforcement perseverance. It was a reminder of the risks and rewards of daring criminal acts, as well as the lengths to which law enforcement would go to bring criminals to justice. The lessons learned from the Brinks Robbery had a lasting effect on law enforcement practices. The FBI, in particular, adapted many of the investigative techniques used in the case to future heists and major criminal investigations. The thorough planning and meticulous investigation of the Brinks case became a model for future criminal cases, with law enforcement officials taking away critical lessons on surveillance, tracking financial transactions, and handling high-profile cases. The story of the Brinks Robbery has also become a cultural touchstone, inspiring numerous books, documentaries, and films. It has been romanticized in popular culture, with the robbers often portrayed as daring, clever criminals who managed to outsmart the authorities. While the reality of the crime was far less glamorous, the heist status in American folklore continues to captivate audiences. In the years since the robbery, the legacy of the heist has only grown. The story has been retold countless times, with new generations of people learning about the daring crime that shook Boston and captured the nation's imagination. The heist remains a part of American criminal history, not just for its audacity but also for the lessons it taught about crime, punishment, and the pursuit of justice. If you found this story compelling, please like, share, and subscribe for more gripping true crime investigations and untold FBI cases. Thanks for watching.